Hi everybody, I'm Dennis Prager. This is Dennis Prager's House, Dennis Prager's Fireplace, and Dennis Prager's Ideas. This is the weekly Fireside Chat. This is very important to me. I travel a tremendous amount and I still try to make the time to do this, and we almost don't miss a week. Maybe when I do my annual cruise with listeners, I think it's the only time it's almost impossible, though I have to figure out maybe a Fireside Chat from Germany. That would be fun. Maybe we could think about that in advance. Anyway, virtually every week, my home to yours. It's all spontaneous, nothing scripted. It's a real good chance to, at least for you to get to know me better and what I stand for and ultimately what Prager University stands for. But most important, it's an opportunity to just talk about life. And I'm happy. If you're 98 and you're watching, I'm happy. And if you're 18 and you're 8, I'm happy. Having said that, there's a very large number of you who are quite young, and that is very important to me. Not because you are more valuable than someone who's 98, but because you are the future. It's not a cliche, it's just a fact. So I have never been a youth worshiper, even when I was a kid. I remember I was about 21 years old when they made the vote. They changed the vote from 21 to 18. And I remember saying to my girlfriend at the time, I don't know why they're giving us the vote. And I don't know why I said it, because when I look at the date, I wasn't 18, I was 21. But be that as it may, I remember something saying, why are they giving me the vote? I don't know anything. In other words, I knew, or let's put it this way, I truly believed adults were wiser than I was, which, by the way, is a very good thing for young people to think, because if you're 17 and you think you're wiser than adults, if you're right, you're in really big trouble. Okay? Let me put it to you that way. Let's hope, in fact, the wiser you are at 17, the more you realize a lot of adults are wiser. By the way, a lot of adults are not wiser. This is one of the worst realizations you make when you get older. And if you're 17, you will not have made this, is one day it will hit you, maybe when you're 40, and you will think, there are a lot of dummies who are 40. or even more frightening, there are a lot of 40-year-olds who aren't adults. You become an adult when you decide to act like one. You don't become an adult because you turned a certain age. That's one of the great rules of life. I'm a big one about rules of life. That's called wisdom. I will say, when I was a kid, I loved wisdom. And it was both innate, I just loved it personally, but it was also a big part of the fact that I had a religious education. And that's what religion at its best is about, wisdom. And it's very rarely available outside of religion. Part of the reason that the universities are, as an atheist, liberal Harvard professor, Steven Pinker put it, the universities have become laughing stocks. And a big part of the reason is, unlike the way they were founded, where they were founded rooted deeply in studying the Bible and the Greeks, they knew there was wisdom of the past. You don't have that today. I didn't have that either. I didn't get any wisdom at college. I got knowledge, but I got no wisdom. So that's worthy, by the way, that's worthy of a talk, the wisdom issue. But I want to talk to you, especially those of you, those of you who are younger, but actually this might apply to you if you're 50, not just necessarily if you're 18. I've mentioned this, I don't know if I've mentioned this on in the Fireside Chats, but I've mentioned this on my radio show. And by the way, if you enjoy this, just know I'm on every day for 3 hours all over the country and all over the world on the internet. So it's very easy to find me on the internet if you can't tune in a local station. And I've talked about this very often on my radio show. There was a terrible crisis in America that I don't know anybody talking about it in large numbers other than myself. That's not a boast, it's a complaint. It's a sad realization. And that is the number of adult children who don't talk to their parents. This is a crisis in the United States. I have asked audiences, raise your hand if you know a family. That way they don't have to be self-conscious. It's not necessarily about them. If I said it was your family, people would be embarrassed to raise their hands. So I asked, if you know a family, then there's no embarrassment. If you know a family wherein an adult child does not speak to one or both parents, raise your hand. And I'm telling you, it's never less than a quarter of the audience, and it's very often a third, sometimes even more than a third of the audience will raise their hands. That's incredible. It should be 1 out of 100, not 30 out of 100. And when I get calls from parents, I get calls from men who start crying on the radio. I mean, that's pretty rare. You know, men don't cry that easily. And by the way, that's a good thing, just for the record. To never be able to cry is a problem, but to cry easily is not masculine, to be honest. Okay? There are exceptions. Winston Churchill cried very often. But they were never about Winston Churchill. When Winston Churchill cried, it was about tragedy that he had seen in World War II or in World War I. So that's different. If you cry for others, I'll give you a pass on that. That could be certainly in keeping with healthy masculinity. Anyway, these fathers will call up and cry that they have a daughter or a son who never talks to them or hasn't talked to them in 15 years. There are people who call my show, tell me that they've never met their grandchildren. I got to tell you, I almost cried, to be honest. I can't think of much in life that could be more painful than that. In some ways, look, there's no pain like the loss of a child. But the pain of the loss of a living child can rival it. If you had a child who loved you and then, had cancer at 50, it's horribly painful to lose that child. But you have all that love and bonding as a memory, and you have presumably their children as grandchildren. But to have none of that? So what is going on here? It can't be that the parents of the last generation were so awful that there are all these children, adult children, from 18 to 58 who have been so molested and so abused, unlike the past, that all of a sudden we have this eruption of adult children who don't speak to a parent. It can't be that the parents were all that worse. Something else has happened here. And I think there are a lot of things involved here. One is narcissism. I just think my generation, the baby boomers, was ushered in a narcissism that has not escaped since then. Our parents' generation was the generation of World War II. And I wasn't born then, but my father fought in it. And this was a generation called the Greatest Generation. It was known for giving of themselves. The country called, they answered, they were heroic. And then they produced the most narcissistic generation. That doesn't mean everybody in my generation is a narcissist, obviously. I'm generalizing because it's generalizable. And then narcissists produce narcissists and so on. It's, for most people, not all, everything has exceptions. there are some times if your parent has been evil, I will come back to that. If your parent has truly been evil, okay, you know what? Most parents are not evil. They're flawed. Almost every parent is flawed as a human and as a parent. But evil? There's something else that has happened, and that is, this is my theme. What has happened is the most secular generation in American history, compared to all other generations before it was my generation, the baby boomers. And now it's even more secular. You know, you have religious and nuns, N-O-N-E-S, and how many millennials will say they're nuns? I mean, no religion, the nun, N-O-N-E. But my generation was the baby boomer generation, the post-World War II generation, was the most secular, least religious ever, and I think that's the biggest single factor. So I want to give my own example as the example. Like many people, not all by any means, I had issues with my parents when I was in my teen years and in my early 20s. But there was, first, to say that there was never a time I didn't talk to my parents, it never even occurred to me I'm going to stop talking to my parents. And I'll explain why, because that's the punchline here. But not only that, there was never a time that they even really knew I had these issues, because I treated them with honor and respect at all times. When I left my parents' home at the age of 21, permanently, living on my own, I called my parents every week of their lives till they died at the ages of 96 and 89, respectively. There wasn't a week that I missed. It was just a given. I would call them up. And why? Even when I had difficulties with them, why did I do that? There was a reason. I know the reason. There were two reasons. The biggest reason was I actually believed that God gave the 10 Commandments, and in those 10 Commandments is a commandment, honor your father and mother. It doesn't say honor your father and mother if you really like them, honor your father and mother if things are going well. It also doesn't say love your father and mother. One of the reasons I'm crazy about the Bible is, back to my first theme, wisdom. There is a commandment to love your neighbor as yourself, to love God, and to love the stranger. But there's no commandment to love your parents. You don't have to love your parents. You have to show them respect. You have to honor them. In fact, they're the only creature you have to honor. The word honor does not appear as a command to any other creature in the world. Just parents. That's how important that is. Now, okay, so you'll say, well, what if my father molested me sexually, raped me, boy or girl for that matter? Okay, folks, bad, what a lawyer say? Bad something make bad laws, or a bad situation, or whatever it is. In other words, you can't make any law if you have to include every possibility. My best example is not to do with law. It's seatbelts save lives. Well, you'll say, but wait a minute. I read about a case where somebody was killed precisely because they wore a seatbelt, which I have, by the way. It happens. Where in a crash, it actually gets locked in to the buckle gets locked into the fastener, whatever it is, and they die of smoke inhalation or actually get burned alive in the car because they can't escape the seatbelt. Does that mean that seatbelts don't save lives? Seatbelts save lives. You got to honor your parents. Are there exceptions? Just as there are exceptions to the seatbelt, there are. I understand that, but it's very, very rare. As I said, your parent has to be evil. Not mistaken, not weak, not flawed, and a whole host of other things. I believe that. I believe that I still believe this. There is a God in the universe who makes moral demands on me. And if you don't believe that, that's a problem. Because if God doesn't make moral demands on you, who does? You? Okay, I don't trust people nearly as much as the secular trust people because I know human nature too well. So I think it's better to feel that there is a God, a good God, a just God who makes commandments of me than I just have to answer to Dennis. Okay, because Dennis can manipulate Dennis all he wants. But the other way, it's much harder. So the combination of narcissism, everything revolved around this generation. That's what the parents of the World War II crowd, the World War II parents, raised the next generation where everything revolved around them to a large extent. And it's gotten even worse with helicopter parents. And, you know, we don't want you to walk alone at the age of 10, you know, lest you be attacked. And it can only create a narcissism. This, I should talk about this once. It would just be interesting to those of you who are quite young, you know, you teenagers and those of you in your 20s and 30s, you would find fascinating the difference in the way kids are brought up today, or you were brought up. Everyone I know was told by their parents very infrequently, everyone in my generation, we were told by our parents very infrequently, I love you. Okay? It was very rare. My parents never came to any of my basketball. They came to one. I played in Madison Square Garden once. I grew up in New York, and I played in Madison Square Garden for 56 seconds. My high school team played a game before a Knick game. And when the coach realized it was mathematically impossible for us to win, he put me in. He was right, by the way. I was not a good player. I was just so tall that they put me on the team because I could actually move. But anyway, they never came to any of the games. I never expected my parents to come to my games. Here's the amazing thing. I actually didn't want them to come to my games because I wanted to be Mr. Independent and not somebody's son. You know, mommy's watching me. I would have felt funny. Oh, there's my mom. I'm not saying you should feel funny. I'm only explaining the differences that existed. But it wasn't a child-centered world as much as it became later. But it was more so than my parents had, which was completely non-child-centered. So the narcissism and the elimination of religious demands, like honor your father and mother, that has resulted, I believe, in this phenomenon of people not speaking to their parents. I mean, never. I don't mean less frequently. I don't mean strained relations. I mean no relations. They basically have said, I died. There was a man who called my show just a couple of weeks ago who told me he's a very nice man, a very nice sounding guy. He agreed with me on everything. And in passing, he happened to mention to me that he and his wife are so angry at her parents that they have not spoken to them in, 20 years, and they've never seen their grandchildren. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, because they wanted their daughter to leave the marriage early on. And I made a big mistake. I should have said, well, why did they want that? I don't usually make these mistakes on the radio, but it was a mistake. I was so annoyed with him about that. I said, I don't understand. What did they do to deserve? Let's say they were totally wrong. They wanted their daughter to divorce you. Okay, let's say. Let's say they were totally wrong. You are wonderful and she is wonderful and you have a great marriage, and for some crazy irrational reason they wanted their daughter in the early years of your marriage to leave you. Let's say all of that is true. I would like to hear their side. I'm always aware on radio when I only hear one side. But let's say that's true. They still don't deserve the fate they got. And if he was not a religious guy, and he did not feel that God said to him, honor your father and mother. He was just so annoyed with them, they never got to see their grandchildren. It seems to me that that's overkill. That's like, shooting the proverbial mosquito with a cannonball. They should have been told off. They should have been told, this is an alienating thing. Nevertheless, We're not going to be coming over every Sunday, and so on. But you'll never see your grandchildren. It almost made me think maybe the parents were right. Maybe the daughter should have left this guy. If my wife were super duper angry at her parents, I would tell her, honey, they're still your parents. We can't deprive them of their grandchildren, or for that matter, of us. A woman called me many years ago when I first began raising this issue on the radio from Santa Monica, California. And those of you who know Santa Monica, it didn't shock me. There are a lot of wonderful people in Santa Monica, okay, I know that, but there's a lot of narcissism too. Anyway, so she called, she says, Dennis, you ask people who don't speak to their parents to call in. I'm 25, I don't speak, or 28. She was in her, between 25 and 30. I never speak to my mother. I go, really? Did she abuse you? Oh, no, she never abused me. She didn't abuse you physically or sexually or verbally? No. In fact, she really loved me. And I remember thinking, there's something wrong here. Her mother loved her, and she doesn't speak to her mother ever? So, of course, I posed the question. I said, I don't understand. Your mother loved you, showed you love, and you never talked to her? That's right. I said, why not? So she said, because if I let her into my life, she would dominate it. She's a dominating woman. So I said, you don't talk to your mother ever because she has a dominating personality? Isn't the answer, don't let her dominate? The answer is not play dead? Isn't that like overkill? And then, for me, the punchline came next. I said, am I correct in just assuming that you've discussed this with a therapist? She said, yes, I've discussed this with my therapist a lot. And I'll bet you your therapist agrees with you not to talk to your mother. That's right. And that's one of the examples I have of where therapists actually do harm, not good. Some therapists are great, most are not. A good therapist would try to reconcile the daughter and the mother, not say, oh, that's great, never talk to your mother. So something to think about. And by the way, just on a selfish grounds, if you ever plan on having children, maybe what goes around comes around. Maybe if you mistreat your parent, they might do the same. After all, those kids who never see their grandparents are going to grow up one day. And they're going to wonder, gee, why did my parents never let me see my grandparents? That's not a good model to offer your children. Okay, time for Q&A. Thank you, Megan. All right, Patrick, 16 years old, Ventura, California. What inspired you to create PragerU? To be precise, well, I guess I did create it, but it wasn't my idea. So yes, I created it with him, but it was not my idea. It was completely Alan Estrin's idea. And almost out of nowhere, he just suggested, you know what, I think we should start a Prager University. We were actually on one of my listener cruises somewhere in the world when he said that. And since Alan never tells jokes, never. Okay, never means never. That's not his personality. He neither tells them nor laughs at them. I love ribbing him. Anyway, Alan said that to me, so since I know he never jokes, I thought, okay, Alan, it's a great idea. Let's start Prager University. And I just figured nothing will happen, but he is a very serious man, and we developed it. And what inspired you to create it? So now let me answer that part. You get no wisdom in the vast majority of elementary schools, high schools, colleges, and graduate schools in the Western world, not just the United States. A lot of you are watching outside the United States. This is all true throughout the world. Very, very, very rarely do you get what is the most important thing you can get from adults. The most important, not love, not facts. The most important thing adults can give you is wisdom. And you're not getting it. Anyway, the unwise can't give wisdom. The wise give wisdom. And they were deprived of it from the 60s on. The post-World War II generation has been troubled in this way. So we want to give you wisdom about what is life about, and undo, I be very open, undo the damage of the universities and the high schools, 5 minutes at a time. We now have 400 5-minute videos up with 4 former prime ministers, 4 Pulitzer Prize winners. That's the biggest award in America for journalism. Professors, believe it or not, from Stanford, Yale, Harvard, UCLA, UC Berkeley, Stanford, and other universities. We don't pick them based on prestigious name, just giving you examples. And you'll really, really learn a lot. You should watch all of them a few times, though, because we pack a lot into 5 minutes. But it's life-changing stuff. And life-enhancing on every subject other than the natural sciences and math. We're not going to teach you neurosurgery in 5 minutes. We're well aware of that. But the meaning of life and its associated issues, you can learn a lot in 5 minutes. Well done. Mario, 17, Carlsbad, California. Hello, Dennis. What is the right age to get married? As soon as you find the right person. That's the answer. And the sooner, the better, in my opinion. The right people don't grow on trees. And it's easier to find, especially for a woman. And I know, you see, whenever you make a distinction between male and female, the unwise will tell you that's sexist. Notice they never say it's not true. I care what's true. I don't care if it sounds sexist. I care if it's true. It is the opposite of honesty and wisdom to just label something instead of dealing with it. Life has distinctions between men and women. It is easier, all things considered, for a woman to find a good man at 25 than at 45. That's a fact, not an opinion. It's just a fact. You could find at 45. You could find at 75. It happens all the time, but it doesn't happen as much as the other way. So for both sexes, you meet a truly wonderful human being with whom you can enjoy life. And I always mention that, enjoy life. Values are critical, but they're not enough. You could share values with somebody and not love them. You could share values with somebody and not enjoy them. You have to share values, but it's not enough. It's like oxygen is necessary for life, but it's not enough. You also need nitrogen, and you need food, and you need a lot of things. That's the answer to your question. When is the right time? When you meet the right person. But you should look for the right person when you can start looking. Caroline, 14, Georgia. I assume the state of Georgia, not the country of Georgia. Do you believe Trump will be reelected in 2020? I never make predictions. Do I believe he can be reelected? Yes. And given that the Democrats will apparently nominate someone who is a socialist, who does not understand the basic rule of life, that only capitalism creates prosperity, only, that socialism spends the money of capitalism, that socialism is not concerned with liberty, but with just a reorientation of the economy of a society, I think he can win. I believe that the Democrats have gone so far radically left. You'll say, well, the Republicans have gone radically right, but that's not true. You can't give me anything, any example comparable to what the left has done. The conservatives been conservative. They haven't adopted new positions. The new positions are almost all on the left. I mean, whatever, you could be an atheist and be repulsed by the Virginia law, the New York State law, that for any reason that a woman wants, she could abort a child up until through the 9th month, through the day of delivery. That's radical stuff. Most Americans, including many Democrats, think that that's morally troubling. Martina Navratilova, one of the great tennis stars of the last generation, is a gay woman and was one of the first openly gay women who was a champion in tennis or in any sport. So she just announced that it's not fair when someone with a male body competes in tennis with somebody who has a female body. She doesn't deny that there are men who identify as women and are now transgender women. She doesn't have an issue with that. She has an issue with their competing in sports. It's just not fair, and it's happening more and more. And yet, every Democratic nominee agrees with that. Yes, of course. Let a male body compete against women in sports. Because that person considers herself a female. I'm even saying herself. I'll give you the respect of identifying what you want to be identified as. But I have respect for the women in sports who work so hard at tennis or volleyball or basketball. And why is there women's sports? Because they can't compete against male bodies. That's the reason. So if male bodies can compete in women's sports, that ends women's sports, doesn't it? But there isn't one Democrat running for president who would agree with what I just said. Martina Navratilova, lifelong activist for gay rights, has now been kicked out of the LGBT community because she said that it's not fair to women if male bodies compete against them. That's how radical the left has become. What's our time frame? 32. Wow. I guess I'll have to say goodbye then. Well, everybody, you want wisdom, watch our videos and read my explanation of the Bible, the most wise book ever written. It's called The Rational Bible. Volume 2 is coming out shortly. It'll be 5 volumes, the first 5 books. If that doesn't touch your life, not much will. It's very important stuff. What we're doing here is really important. And if you're young, you're lucky to be tuning in, because the biggest gift any adult, myself or any other, can give you is, as I said, wisdom. This is what life's about, young person. We've seen it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. I'm Dennis Prager. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to keep these Fireside Chats free, please do by donating to PragerU.